Thank you for joining this webinar today. So today I'm going to talk about some new stuff that we've got going on at Pluralsight that I'm really excited about. So this is mostly for software developers and cloud practitioners to really get hands-on, and I'm legitimately excited about these features because it's real features that like real environments, real sense, real cloud stuff, and it's an excellent way to get hands-on. I do have some slides, so I'm going to kind of present a few concepts with some slides, but then we're just going to jump right into the features and right into the code. So let's get started with this. And I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So the title of this webinar today is Hands-On with Sandboxes and Cloud Labs. So I'm a senior developer evangelist at Pluralsight. Tell you a little bit about me. I've been a developer for around 20 years or so, worked with a large variety of companies from Fortune 100 to small little startups, mostly in software engineering, architecture, DevOps, that types of things. Very hands-on, and also I have years of tech leadership experience. So I've been a tech lead, a manager, things like that, as well as a practitioner in the code. So what we're going to talk about first is how we learn new skills, specifically tech skills. And there, there's a million different ways that people learn, but fortunately there is a framework here of modalities that we can look at. And it's called VARK. And first part is visual learners. And there are people that learn by seeing things. And this, of course, is what much of Pluralsight is based on. If we see people writing code and developing code and building platforms, we can see it in action, visualize it, and make it work. And then there's auditory learners. So these are the types of learners who listen to lectures. So picture the college professor up lecturing on a whiteboard. Most of that is auditory, and you take notes and things like that. Now that's also covered here at Pluralsight because you can listen to our instructors and authors talk about things and concepts. And then we have reading and writing. So reading and writing, pretty obvious. You read a book, you write things, take notes, things like that. That's another style of learning. So these are three of the type of learning styles where people learn best. Some people absolutely have to see something. They can't hear it, they can't read it, they have to see it. And then there's folks that are auditory, reading or writing. The final part of this, and sometimes I have a hard time saying this word, is kinesthetic. Now this is learning by doing. This is actually having your hands on it. So think about if you're learning how to fix a car. With visual learning, which is the V, you would watch somebody replace a water pump on a car. With auditory, you would listen to somebody talk about replacing a water pump on a car and all of the things you need to consider and all the things you need to do. And then reading and writing, of course, would be opening up the manual and reading through the instructions for that. Kinesthetic is actually grabbing the wrench and replacing the water pump on your car with a combination of any of these other things, right? So it's like grabbing a manual, grabbing a wrench, and actually pulling that water pump off and doing it. So when we talk about tech skills, what are some of the stumbling blocks that people generally have? So if you're an engineer or you have engineers on your team who need to learn a new technology, there are some pretty common stumbling blocks that come up. And I've gone through these stumbling blocks myself, learning new technologies for years and years as a developer. So let's say I need to learn a new language. For one reason or another, this language has come up and I know nothing about it. I have previous tech skills, I know other languages, but I've got to learn this new one. The first thing I need to do is download a runtime or an interpreter. I need to download something to make this work. There are very few languages that are natively supported in all operating systems, so you have to download something. It's the .NET framework, the Go compiler, the Java runtime, whatever it is. I have to be able to find that and download it and run it. Then I have to install it. With most things these days, that's just a few clicks and you kind of go, but sometimes it can be a lot more complex than that. Knowing what to install. Now, this is important because it's not usually just a single thing that you need. Usually there's things that that kind of surround it. You know, if you're doing JavaScript, well, I need a web server, I need all of these different things. How do I know that if I've never installed it in language? So I don't know what I don't know here. And then finally is know how to configure it. So typically I'll take Python, for instance. With Python, you have to download the Python interpreter. You have to configure it, make sure it's part of your path so that when you type Python or Python 3 at the prompt that comes up, you have to know to install pip so that you can install packages. All of these things are things that you don't know when you're first starting out with a language. And so it makes it a pretty big stumbling block. And then how to run an application. So this one sometimes is really easy, but let's say you're learning something like Rust, you need to know that to run an application, you run something called cargo. It's just one of those things that, you know, it's part of the stumbling blocks. These are things that can slow your developers down. To learn a new cloud technology. So here's some more stumbling blocks. For one thing, I have to have an account with a provider, right? So if I want to learn something on AWS or Azure or GCP, at a bare minimum, I have to be able to log into that platform to build something. Or I need permission to use my organization's account, which most organizations don't just hand out cloud accounts to everybody for obvious reasons. So I need permission to go in there and use my organization's assets. Another stumbling block is I got to know how to avoid breaking it, right? So if I'm learning a new database technology and I log into my employer's cloud service and I start tinkering around, and I take down the database, that's horrible. So when we look at this VARK framework, how does Pluralsight address those four things? And then we'll talk about how we address those roadblocks. So with visual, we can watch videos. We've been able to do that since the beginning with Pluralsight, where we've been able to watch videos or have an in-person instructor way back in the early days who can show you, you know, this is how you write something in C# and they'll write it out in front of you. Auditory is the same thing. You can listen to the author in the course. You can listen to just the audio. You could actually take some courses, you could take them as like a podcast. You could just have it on your phone and listen, because most of the concepts can be expressed with sound. Or reading and writing. We have guides, and you can go through these guides, and step by step, I can create an EC2 service in AWS by reading the guides. So we're able to address all three of these learning styles. But the final modality, kinesthetic, how do we do that? Well, traditionally, say you want to learn C#, you would load up the course in Pluralsight. You can download some of the sample files. Then you'll need to install Visual Studio. You'll need to set up your path. You'll need to either the compiler works to compile a console program, or you'll have to figure out how to run F5 and debug things in Visual Studio to get that kinesthetic piece. But now we've got something a lot better. So let's check it out. Now I'm logged in here into my Pluralsight console. So let's say the first thing we want to learn JavaScript. So go in here, search JavaScript. When we scroll down, we've got a lot of courses here, ton of courses. Let's just click on JavaScript fundamentals here. And we have introduction and setup, language, features, operators, all of the things that you would expect, that your engineers will expect when they're going to learn a new language. They're going to want to look at some of the things like operators, functions, data structures, things like that. And that's all covered here in this course. But what if they want to actually write and learn some JavaScript? So I have my machine completely set up here to where I can open up Visual Studio Code. I can create an index.html and start dumping JavaScript in it, and then run a web server with Node.js. It's an internal web server, and I can pop it up in my window. But that's only stuff that I know because I've done this so many times before, right? But if I'm a new JavaScript person, I don't even know that these things are available most of the time. So I've got to figure out how to run JavaScript on my machine if I just want to tinker around. But here we have a sandbox. And this is the new feature with Pluralsight, where this will come up. We will have a web browser, we will have files, we'll have all those things that we need. So we'll follow these instructions here as soon as the sandbox comes up. And we will take a look at working with JavaScript in the sandbox. And it generally doesn't take this long to load, but I think this has something to do with the fact that I'm sharing my screen and streaming at the same time. So there's my sandbox. Now in this course, we have all of these different modules. All of the exercise files are right here in this workspace. So if we're looking at different Webpack files or Webpack config, all of these things that they go through in that course will be right here. Now here it says in the terminal below the editor, change the appropriate directory. So we'll do cd 03, and we'll do npm run dev. And it looks like we have an error here. We'll try sudo npm run dev. And it could be that we're in the wrong folder. So I will open up a web browser. So here's how you open up a web browser. There are little tabs here. Open up a web browser to localhost 1337. It's possible that we'll restart this here. See if we can run a build first. Okay, so we're going to have to try another demo, I believe, because this one does not like to load. Let's try a different folder. '04. And this one doesn't work either. Okay, so rather than make you look through this, we will try a different lab. We're sticking in JavaScript. We'll try the getting started sandbox. Okay, and it'll be just a minute here. Okay, and let's see what kind of files we have here. And here we can see our web page coming up. So in number 3, let's change something here just to kind of show how this works. So we have this looks like Carved Rock Fitness website that comes up. And we can see here in the code, Carved Rock Fitness. And we'll change the title. And I'm not able to see the title there, so let's look for We'll just make a quick change to this and refresh it, see if it comes up. And there's test. So I was able to change this from clothing to test. And so we're able to change these things real time. So as we're going through this course, we can work on changing this HTML, changing the JavaScript within the HTML for all of these files. We can see home.js, index.html, all of these different files that are in all of these different folders. And that's how easy it is to start getting into JavaScript and doing JavaScript things. But let's take a look at some other consoles here. We'll look at something a little more complex than JavaScript. Because JavaScript is relatively easy to set up on a machine compared to something like Golang. So here I'm going to search for Golang. We'll go to the core language here. And let's see, we've got a bunch of different ones here. We'll go back a little bit, search for Go. How about we try creating web services with Go? And that one doesn't have it. There we go, this one, Go getting started. This has a sandbox. Now again with Go, we have a list of topics here, working with primitive data types, working with collections, functions, and methods. So we can go through each of those and we can do it right here in the sandbox. So in here, we have our hello world.go. Let's go ahead and run that. C2 introduction. We'll just go run hello world.go. There's hello playground. Hello webinar guests. It's that easy. But what you might be asking is, how real is this environment? So this is a Go environment, but is it like really a Go environment, or is it kind of something that's made to emulate a Go environment? And I will show you that this is a real Go environment. So first thing I will do here is we're going to find, I'm going to copy and paste here. We're going to create a CSV called names.csv, and this is comma separated values. Okay, now I have comma separated values here. We have name, first name, last name, email address for 10 people here. And I'm going to create another file. We'll just call this demo.go. And in demo.go, I have a quick program that I've written here. Package main. We'll start importing things. Coding. CSV. FMT. IO. OS. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that CSV file and display the values of it. We'll do our func main here, and then I will just copy and paste some of this code that I've written. So this is a real Go environment. And what I've done here is I've got some code that opens up names.csv, which we just created. If it can't open it up, it will throw this error. And then we create a new CSV reader. And for each of the records we read, we're going to print out ID, first name, last name, and email to the console based on these records. So we're going to show exactly how real this is. Go run demo.go. Oh. And see, this is part of the learning process. You get real Go errors there. And there we go. So we have names.csv, and it's an actual real file in an environment. I'm using this Go program to open up names.csv and parse through it with this reader and display with printf on the screen. So you can see here, each of these is printed out on the screen. So this is a legitimate, real Go environment. So the reason that's important, I can go through all of these different folders here and modify these files. I can follow this Go Getting Started course, which I highly recommend it. It's a great course. I can go through this course. I can go through all of these different concepts. I can do the things the author suggests to do, and I can really pick it up and learn it. And if I decide, you know, it's Saturday night and I'm a little bored and I really want to learn some just bizarre things with Go, or just try some things like, say, I want to open up a CSV and display all the records, I can do that too. I don't have to work within just the confines of the course. I can experiment and learn. And for some people, myself included, that's where I learn best, is where I will go in and experiment with the code, put in some strange things and see what kind of strange results I get, and do that kind of thing over and over. And so this is a legitimate Go environment. And I will show another great environment here. Let's try C# next. Now, if you've worked with C# at your company, or you have C# developers, or you are a C# developer, you know that environment setup can be a little interesting sometimes, especially with .NET Core. So with this, I've got object-oriented programming fundamentals in C#. I've got things like building entity classes, establishing relationships, all of these different core concepts that are going to help me learn C# really well. And of course, I have a sandbox. So in here, I can go in and I have a set of instructions here that's a part of this course. The .NET solution is at the end of the course. It contains several class libraries and the associated unit tests. So let's say I don't have all this set up on my computer. You know, I can't run unit tests. I can't do all this because I'm still learning this. Or maybe my employer doesn't allow me to install .NET Core on my computer because of security reasons. They control what's installed. Well, here I can do all of this through a web browser, and I can run C# unit tests in a web browser. .NET test. And now we can see .NET Core is picking this up, building it, and running a set of tests. And right now it's doing a restore with NuGet. And it's doing all of this stuff in a web browser, as opposed to on my desktop and on my machine. And it's taken a little while, but a lot of restore projects do, because it's entirely dependent on the internet connection. There we go. Now it's restoring all of the different projects in this ACM project, which is a project that is tied to this course. And there's my unit tests. As I can see here, none of them have failed. 4 of them have passed. I can go in and just start taking a look at some of these things. Here's my test classes, test methods. These are all real unit tests in real C# running on a real environment. So we have all of our different tests here. We can make changes to them. We can run them again. Let's see, we're expecting Bilbo Baggins, so we'll just change that to Jeremy, and then we'll run the test again. And again, I can sort of stray outside of the usual ways of going through things if I want to. And there we go. Now I have a failed test because I changed what was expected. I changed my assert. And this is all easy stuff. So if I wanted to change an assert on actual tests running in production at my employer, that would be pretty frowned upon. You know, I say, well, I'm trying to learn unit tests. I want to see how these asserts work. So I changed this thing and broke the build, you know. You don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff because I'm able to just go in here and play around. And how real is the C# one? We will also do a little test of that. Here, so .NET new console -o hello. Let's create a new .NET Core application. And again, I'm not going to make people sit and watch me code all of this stuff in. So I'll do a lot of copying and pasting here. But here's my hello application. So I've created this console write line hello world. Let's do a .NET run. Make sure this thing runs. And there it is. Hello world. Cool. So I'm going to change all of this. And again, I'm copying and pasting so we don't have to watch me code all this in. But I'm going to build an application here that will read all of the repos from Pluralsight and display them on the screen. So if we're looking here, this is going to pull in collections. It's going to pull in the net library, JSON library, all of these different things. And I need to create a repository for this. So that's as simple as creating a new file. We're going to call this repository.cs. And then I'll paste in this and clean it up a little bit. Here's a repository. This is the all of the fields that need to be added to this object, which are name, description, HTML, homepage, watchers, etc. So now that I've got this running, I should be able to just run this program. And so again, I'm straying off the path, right? I'm doing experimental things. I want to know how to read from an RSS feed and display it on a console. So I've got this program here, starts up an HTTP client, which is basically a web browser without all the Chrome and everything in C#, where I can go out and request pages and pull them down and things like that. I've got a synchronous task here to process repositories. So it's going to take in this data. It's going to go out with the HTTP client, grab this data, pull it in, and it's going to take this data and stick it into this repositories collection. And then I'm just going to for each through that collection and display the name, description, etc. So let's run it and see if it works. So .NET run. And looks like this one's taking a little bit longer to compile, but it's a lot more complicated than a hello world. And there we go. So now I have a list of the repositories from Pluralsight. They're available. We have our React router, all of this. So this environment, this C# environment is, again, just kind of want to reiterate that it's not a fake environment that has been created to kind of go along with the course, you know. So as long as you do everything that's in the course, everything will work. It's not like that at all. This is a real legitimate .NET instance running here. And I just made it go out to the internet, grab stuff from GitHub, pull it down, and display it on the screen. So it doesn't get much more real than that. And for one final one, I'll show, because I really wanted to kind of push the limits of these environments and just kind of see exactly what I could do, because I'm a developer and that's what developers do. We always try to push the limits and see what's possible. So here, go to a Python one. I believe this one has, yes, this one has a sandbox. So I got core Python getting started. This is a great course for exactly as it said, getting started with Python. And look at this, it shows installing and starting Python. So shows how to install Python, interactive Python, the Python standard library, all of these things, if you choose to run Python on your machine, on your desktop. Or you can just click Launch Sandbox, and you'll have a Python environment already installed. And again, here are our demo files. Let's check that out really quick. We've got REPL session. Course. This one is clip 3. So we'll do Python 3, REPL session. Hello, Python. So it's basically you can run any of these different little applications. But if somebody is very curious, you know, you're a curious person, and I see a lot of REPL stuff in here. What if I want to generate an image with Python, for instance? That would require a real Python environment. That would require something that is not in this course whatsoever. But I want to try this out. So I'm going to create a new file. And again, I have pre-written a lot of this to save folks from watching me type clumsily. So we're going to call this image.py. And in here, I'm going to import a couple of things, which I will need to install. Here, let's install OpenCV Python. And OpenCV is an image library for Python. And as we can see, I'm installing it right now in my virtual web-based environment. And it actually is installing really fast right here right now. So this is a pretty big library. It's going to install NumPy for me. And it shows me some warnings here that hopefully shouldn't affect things too much. There we go. Now we've installed. The first thing I want to do is create a function here. So again, I'm playing around with things, and I don't want to break my employer's workspace. I don't want to affect any production code in my organization. I don't want to break my own machine. I just want to generate an image. And if everything goes south, I don't want to have some major repercussions for that. So I'm going to play around in this Python environment on Pluralsight to do this. So here we have a function, create blank, takes in an RGB color, width, height of an image, and it'll create an image and fill it with a color. So we'll set the width and height for this. Oops. And our colors. So I'm going to generate a 300 by 300 image out of nothing. For red, we want to determine that red is 25500. Those are RGB values, which are reversed here, and then I want to write something on top of it. So for that, I have text, hello world. I'm using the OpenCV library to grab this font, Hershey Simplex font, scale it at 1, and then org is my coordinates that where I want to place it on the screen. I want to place it roughly in the middle of the screen. And the color of that font will be white, 255, 255, 255. And color 2 is going to be for the shadow that I'm going to put underneath it. Oh, and I think I need to put in a thickness here. Thickness of 2. And then the last bit of code is using the CV2 image library to create an image. So we're going to add text to this image up here. We're going to create a blank image. We're going to fill it with red. We've selected a message and a font. And we're going to take that and we're going to use this library to put that text over the image. The first one's going to be white. The second one is going to be flipped and reversed down below and going to be darker red. So this should run. So make sure I'm in the right space. Okay. Python 3 image.py. Now I look at my workspace and there's an image generated with OpenCV. So once again, this is a real Python environment. This is something where if I want to go through and follow everything in this course, I can follow every single one of these things. I can modify Python, I can write Python. I don't have to worry about breaking my machine, breaking production code, anything like that. Or if I decide to get a wild hair and generate an image and I find some stuff on the internet about that, I can run this image.py and generate this image. And it's available here. I could even download it if I'd like. And so that's another really cool thing is if I really start getting into what I'm doing and I want to save this for later and say, okay, well, later I want to come back in and do that, I can just simply download the files. So these are real environments. This is real hands-on coding, and this really fills that need of learning by doing, which is something that, a lot of people talk about. I'm one of those people who says, I have to do it. I have to get my hands in there. I have to get in and start doing things. I could read 100 books on Python and still not be able to do anything with it until I've opened up a console and written some Python. Check out some new, if I want to learn Erlang, I can read all the books on Erlang. I can watch people talk about Erlang. I can listen to people talk about Erlang. But until I sit down and write some Erlang, I will not know what I'm doing. And that's exactly what this targets. This targets all 4 quadrants there of learning modalities to really help a barrier-free experience. So I don't have to install anything on my machine. I don't have to get permission from anyone. I don't have to worry about modifying code and breaking things. I just open up a web browser and in and ready to go. So let's look at Cloud Labs. That's another cool thing. So we talked about one of the barriers, the big barriers for your team with cloud is, are you going to give access to every person on your team, access to your cloud environment? Probably not. Very few scenarios would you say, okay, I've got 10 developers on my team and I'm going to give them all access to Azure, let them jump into the instances and start playing around until they learn what they're doing. That's not something that any leader is really going to say. So this is where Pluralsight has an excellent solution for that. So I just searched for AWS here, for instance. And we've got a bunch of different things here. We've got certifications, things like that. Let's look at some fundamental cloud concepts. We've got all kinds of different courses for this. But what if I want to get on AWS and I want to do something in AWS? Let's find us a cloud lab here. applications. There should be a good cloud lab in here. We will search AWS Labs. Here we go. Create a VPC on AWS with the wizard. And this is a course from Michael Bender and Tim Warner, two very knowledgeable folks. And they have a lab. So let's just jump in and start the lab. Let's say I have no idea what a VPC even is, but we're going to jump in and start the lab. As you can see here, it says we're loading your environment login information. This is real information. So I'll go here, incognito window. Copy link address. Or open link in incognito window. And it even says here in the help, use incognito or private mode for best experience. That way you're not logging in. If you do have an AWS account, you're not logging into that. You're just logging into this fresh experience here. Okay, and I've got my account ID pre-populated. Copy my username. And my password. And here we go. I am in an AWS management console. And this is not like web-based training. This isn't a website with a bunch of images that you click on that looks just like AWS. We are actually in AWS. So we'll close this here. We want to create a VPC with public and private subnets. And it says your company created a multi-tier line of business application. So this is like a real world scenario. This is a scenario that your organization will be putting these developers in. However, they're not actually touching your AWS account or your AWS infrastructure. They're working all entirely within this. Again, it's not called a sandbox, but this is pretty much a sandbox also for AWS. So we can log in from the top navigation bar, open services menu, and select VPC from the network and content delivery. There's VPC. And here we are in a real AWS environment. In the virtual private cloud, choose Elastic IPs. Click on that. Allocate Elastic IP address. Okay, Amazon's pool of IP addresses. We have that here. We've got our network border group. It says click allocate. So I'm doing real cloud stuff right here, and it's all guided. See, this is all very guided stuff. So it'll go through and tell you exactly what to enter, how to enter it, where to go. So we'll just keep going with this. We've allocated that on the navigation plane. Click VPC dashboard. There's our VPC dashboard. And then launch VPC wizard. So here we go. Now we've got a wizard coming up. And again, it's all real AWS stuff. Select a VPC configuration page. That's where we're at right now. Select the VPC with public and private subnets. Just like that. And here's our settings. And so this one, you can also go off the trail a little bit. with these cloud things. You can go in and create different instances and things like that. Where I think the most value is here is that you're given an end goal. So you or the engineers on your team are given a very solid goal. We want them to create a VPC with public and private subnets. And by the end of this lab, they'll be able to do it. And it won't be like, you know, some kind of theoretical, you know, here's the things you need to know or things like that. You're actually getting your hands on it. You're getting into AWS right here. It's a very safe area for experimentation and learning. They can go in. If I put in the wrong IP address in here, it's not going to work. And I can struggle with it and figure out why. If I do a typo, if I skip one of these steps, we'll get some errors, but these errors won't be things that are showing up on your cloud, on your setup. And you can go through, there's so many of these labs. You can go through, and even if you know next to nothing, like maybe this is the first time somebody's logged into AWS in their entire life, they will not be lost because of these explicit instructions that say, this is how you do this, this, and this. Now, on the flip side, if there's somebody that has spent all of their time on GPC or Azure, and now they need to figure out this AWS thing, they're going to have a lot of that background knowledge, but this is going to direct them right to the right areas. You know, we call these VPCs in this service, and we have these things here, and you can kind of organize. So what this makes for is just really fast learning for your engineers. And it's hands-on. You're in the lab. You're actually at aws.amazon.com, which is really helpful. So for years and years, people have done, you know, screenshots in a document. You take those screenshots, and then of course, if you've spent any time on AWS or Azure or anything, you know that screenshots have a very small shelf life because UI elements are changed, services are changed, things change all the time, every day. So that kind of a mode of teaching is just pretty much gone at this point. And I mentioned the HTML page with images you clicked on. I've actually worked on those way back in the early mid 2000s, where I built web pages with interfaces, and I took a screenshot and sliced it up. And if you click on this image, this will pop up this window. Those things are a thing of the past. And these cloud labs are nothing like any of those. You're actually just logging in with this login information. And then when you go to end the lab, it will destroy the environment. It will destroy the login names and passwords that I had earlier, completely destroy those, get rid of them. They're gone. Here in a few minutes, this thing will kick me off and I won't be able to go anywhere. Oh, there we go. See, I was kicked off immediately. I can try to log back in. It's not going to happen. It's gone. But one of the most important things is they're jumping on AWS and doing things with AWS, and it's completely separate from your organization's AWS, but they're still getting real hands-on experiences. So this is great. I mean, this is why I've been so excited about this, is because as an engineer, you have to go through all of these things, you know, that we talked about earlier. You got to download things, you got to install them, you got to configure them, all of this to learn something new. All those barriers are gone. And a lot of times, especially with cloud, it's very expensive to have somebody going on and creating an account and creating services and things like that. And all of this is eliminated. And so to address this part of it, we're now covering all 4 parts. They can watch videos, they can listen to authors, give lectures, read guides, and step through that part of it. And for the kinesthetic part, they can log into a lab or log into an environment and start writing code. So it covers all 4 of this in this this VARK framework. So now I can be available for questions if we have any. And I'm going to check. And we do have some questions. Do you have Kinetic set up for learning networking? Hugh asked, we do have some for setting up networking, absolutely. So I will stop sharing here and just read these questions. So do we have a setup for learning networking? Yes, the VPC example that I posted shows some networking, and most of these are cloud-based networking. So if your question is about networking, like on-prem networking, we don't have any labs set up for that yet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that in the future. But right now it is mostly cloud-based, so you would go onto a VPC and do networking that way. And Bob asks, are there only certain technology courses that have the sandbox available? Yes, we do only have certain languages available. We have a lot of them available. I can, if you want to email me, jeremy-morgan@pluralsight.com, I can get a list of all the technologies that are available and send that out. And that goes for anybody on this webinar right now. Is there a list of sandboxes? Can I get a copy of this presentation to share with developers? That's question by Terry. Yes, I can. I don't have a list of sandboxes available right now, but I can get that. Again, jeremy-morgan@pluralsight.com. I will get a list of all of the sandboxes that are available and send those out. And we can also get a copy of this presentation to share with developers as well. And I think that might be all of our questions that we have so far. So I do want to get a list of sandboxes. Right now we have all of the big ones, like I said, like JavaScript, we have Python, we have C#. We have a lot of the bigger ones, the Golang one, which I was pretty impressed with. Like I said, the ability to just jump in here and start doing all of this silly stuff that I know I can do on my machine with my machine setup, but can I do it on a web browser in this environment? And the answer is yes. So it's just a very good way of doing hands-on learning. So if there are no more questions here, we'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we will have this available online later that we can share. And I want to thank everybody for coming to this webinar. And this has been a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm really excited to share this stuff. I've been doing this on my personal time. I've been jumping into these sandboxes and playing around because it's just a really cool way to learn. I wish it was available 20 years ago when I started as a developer. Probably would have made life much easier for me. However, it's here now for engineers, and it's great. It's a very high quality platform that we're really proud of. So thank you everybody for joining, and have a great day. If you have any other questions or anything like that, if you didn't want to bring it up here, email me jeremy-morgan@pluralsight.com, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much.